Donald Trump is in a panic right now, and he is showing it as everything around him is falling apart. Now, in the last 24 hours, Donald Trump has attempted to distract us with a multitude of things. He suggested that he's able to void all of President Biden's EOs and pardons. He has suggested that Venezuelan airspace is closed down to get us talking about that. He's tried to dive into the Honduras election. He's even thrown out his old faithful Trump 2028, and none of it is working. He's trying to distract us from the fact that the files still haven't been released, that we have not received economic data on GDP, on unemployment, or inflation. And all of this has backfired because we've got a new thing on the list we want now, and that's the MRI results. Donald Trump is panicking and desperately trying to distract the American people, and it's not working. A tactic that he's been able to employ in the past is now falling apart because everybody is focused on him now. Republicans, independents have all turned on him. MAGA is upset with him, and everybody is laser focused on the things he's not doing, not on the nonsense that he is.
Mike Johnson is absolutely terrified of Republicans losing control of the House of Representatives in the midterms. So much so that he's traveling to Indiana this next week as Republicans reconvene in the state of Indiana to take up redistricting. Now, earlier this week, the Republican Senate Majority Leader in Indiana said that they weren't going to take up anything about redistricting the state of Indiana. And then just today, he reversed course on that. And that came after Mike Johnson made a call to him, reiterating how important it was for Republicans to keep the House. Now, Mike Johnson is Trump's little gopher, do whatever I ask for boy, and Trump is terrified of being impeached again, because this time there's enough senators that might not be on board with keeping it from actually going all the way through. The House will issue those articles of impeachment guaranteed if Democrats win the House in 2026. And Mike Johnson is terrified of what that means for him and his slide into oblivion, because there's no political future for Mike Johnson without Donald Trump.
There is no link to this page on the White House website. It's the Offender Hall of Shame, a record of the media's false and misleading stories flagged by the White Supremacy House. Scroll for the truth. Possible offenses are bias, circular reporting, failure to report, false claim, left-wing lunacy, lie, malpractice, mischaracterization, misrepresentation, omission of context, and woke. And there are pages of violations. And here are some of the offenses. This is so incredibly misleading. They say ICE documents reveal plan to double immigrant detention space this year. The offense is that the Washington Post featured an attorney as an immigration expert. That's it. How dare MSNBC claim that Democrats are on the right side of the government shutdown? ICE moves to shackle 180 immigrants with GPS ankle monitors. The offense is that the Washington Post claims that the monitoring devices is humane and steeped in controversy. The truth is that no, it's not steeped in controversy. This offense is that CNN and other media outlets disparaged a court-authorized law enforcement operation using words like scared and terrorized, whereas the truth is that, well, it's the business's fault. It says that Kevin McCarthy was asked if the assassination of Charlie Kirk was a moment for Republicans to reflect on their rhetoric. That's the offense. I mean, I'm sure you saw this one coming. The mainstream media spent months attempting to uncover Frank Abrego Garcia, portraying him as a Maryland dad. They're tripling down on their Tylenol causes autism claim. An opinion piece in The Hill used a photo from the Biden administration. And another one, someone dared to say that the Republicans can't avoid blame for the government shutdown. So this offense is that the media misrepresented Donald Trump's call for members of Congress to be held accountable for inciting sedition by claiming that he called for their execution. That is true. We all saw his posts. We all saw what he reposted. But the truth is that, well, they shouldn't have said that. CBS News described someone as a Colorado grandfather rather than an illegal immigrant. This one's really sad, but they're pissed off that the LA Times did not say that the perpetrator was an illegal immigrant, and they should have. A co-host on a failing talk show, The View, called government officials racist and horrible human beings for visiting the Alligator Alcatraz ICE detention facility in Florida. And the truth is that they give a very gory example of one of the criminals that was in there and what he did to someone.
This Trump supporter in Oregon is finding out the hard way. Gary Ripka is an Oregon crabber who voted for Donald Trump. He liked the president's focus of securing the border and figured those policies were the best. All the way up in Oregon, where the southern border really matters. He works one of the most dangerous jobs in the world, so he was glad to have a Coast Guard rescue helicopter stationed right in his town of Newport. And it was there for a reason. After a fishing boat capsized in 1985, unaliving 3 people. They unfortunately didn't make it because help was too far away. Want to take a wild guess at what happened to that rescue helicopter that Gary depends on to survive? It's being moved 95 miles down the coast. Why is it being moved down the coast, you might ask? Rumor has it the airport space is being looked at for an ICE detention facility. For guys like Gary, that means a rescue that used to take minutes could now take an hour or more. That's the difference between life and turning into a human popsicle. Now Gary's stuck. He still supports a tighter border, but he's furious it's coming at the direct cost of his safety. The trade war he backed is also threatening to crash the price of crab, making his dangerous job even less rewarding. It makes you question yourself. Is this what I voted for? Ripka said. Gary, this is what you voted for. So enjoy it, pal. It just doesn't seem like these are the decisions about the people who live and work here. Gary voted for a president he thought would protect the country. Now he's finding out his own safety wasn't a part of that plan.
Another scandal from Donald Trump and his administration, as we're finding out that Donald Trump is getting ready to say that parts of Ukraine are actually Russian, which goes against every single country. And the only country who even says that this is a part of Russia is Russia, which makes you wonder, why is the Trump administration doing this? Let's break it down. This is directly coming from the Telegraph, in which they're stating that the Trump administration, or Trump himself, is getting ready to recognize parts of Ukraine, Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk as a part of Russia. And they say that we see Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, we're seeing them go all the way out to Russia to say, hey, if we recognize this area as part of Russia, maybe we can get closer to a peace deal. Let's remember that Steve Witkoff told the Russians, hey, you want to get this deal done? Let me give you all the tricks on how to persuade or trick Donald Trump into saying yes to it. And at the same time, as we're learning from other sources, that Jared Kushner and Witkoff have been secretly working on a plan with the Russians so that the second the war is over, the Trump administration members who have donated a lot of money can make a lot of money, be the first people in to make money inside of Russia, alongside with Steve Witkoff. Which means the only reason why Donald Trump is getting ready to recognize those parts of Ukraine is because he and his friends are going to get filthy rich. Let's remember something. Europe says that land is Ukrainian. Ukraine's own constitution states that that land is Ukrainian. So what gives the U.S. any kind of right to say that land is Russian? They don't. That's the thing. The U.S. has absolutely no right to do so. The only reason why they would be doing this is because they would be gaining a lot of money from the Russians. This all now combines in that 28-point plan in which we found out that Steve Witkoff was trying to give Russia hints on how to get Trump to pass it. That is now being revised by the Europeans to about 19 points. But inside, the one thing kind of still stands of what is happening to this land. That is something in which U.S. officials want Donald Trump to meet with Zelensky face to face. At the same time, Ukraine says, no, this is a straight up red line here. We're not just giving our territory away to Russia. That's rewarding Russia for invading their neighbors, for slaughtering civilians. We're not doing this. Which, yes, would mean that if the United States gave said land to Russia, they're rewarding Russia for slaughtering civilians. It's a lot of different scandals going on at the same time. So what happens here moving forward? Well, we're seeing U.S. representatives meet with Ukrainian officials, and next week, Russian officials meet with U.S. officials. I'll be sure to keep you guys updated on it, so please do share my videos and follow me for more.
The Trump administration is now committing war crimes that are so indefensible that even the guy responsible for making the torture of prisoners at Abu Ghraib possible is now speaking out against them. John Yoo may or may not look familiar to you depending on how much of a political nerd you are, but I guarantee you are familiar with his work, or at the very least, you're familiar with the consequences of his work. Yoo was a part of the George W. Bush administration where he famously helped Dick Cheney build out a little thing called the unitary executive theory. His other greatest hits from his time in the Bush administration include coming up with the legal justifications for warrantless wiretapping, waterboarding, and other enhanced interrogation techniques, which I prefer to call by their scientific name: torture. In other words, John Yoo is a massive piece of shit. I would not spit in that man's mouth if he was dying of thirst. As far as I'm concerned, the damage that John Yoo has done to our country is up there with Ronald Reagan, okay? He is garbage. And yet, even a sentient piece of trash like John Yoo agrees that the Trump administration has crossed a major line with their missile strikes on boats off the coast of South America. In fact, Yoo even went on the record with his criticism, publishing an op-ed in the Washington Post back in September detailing his concerns. A move that, I imagine, probably had pretty significant consequences for his professional career within the Republican Party. So if you're someone who has either continued to defend the Trump administration's actions, or you've simply chosen to look the other way and pretend you haven't noticed that they're committing literal war crimes, this is your sign that you might want to reconsider taking that position, friend. After all, do you really want to be the person who was on the wrong side of history when even John Yoo took the right stance for once?
Controversy as President Donald Trump in a social media post calls Minnesota Governor Tim Walz seriously retarded. Now, the Newsweek article that I was working from with the details of the story, the headline reads that Tim Walz pushes back on Trump. Well, how did Walz push back on Trump? By saying, release the MRI results. So why did he say that? He said that because Democrats have been trying to create this bogus narrative that it's not normal to get a yearly MRI. It's simply not true. I get a yearly CT scan / MRI and echocardiogram because I have heart issues, and so I do it on a yearly basis. It's fairly routine and would be routine for the sitting president of the United States. I don't care what party you belong to, at the age of President Donald Trump. But even beyond that, the last person that can ever go and complain about being called a derogatory word or language being used against them is Governor Tim Walz. I mean, the guy is the biggest bully the Democrats have to offer, and he's bad at it. So first off, he lies constantly. Most recently in Texas, Talking Education, said that we here in Minnesota have universal pre-K. We don't. He continues to perpetuate his stolen valor, claiming to be a rank in the National Guard that he never was. He's talked about on podcasts kicking the GOP's butts using more colorful language than that. Attempted to poke fun at President Donald Trump over the fat ankles rumor. He's lamented in front of a crowd about how when the rumor that President Donald Trump had passed away turned out not to be true, he was sad, but don't worry, one day it will happen. Talked about the joy that he gets when he sees Tesla stock go down. Talks about rural Minnesota being rocks and cows. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Walz is a total hypocrite for attempting to push back on President Donald Trump for calling him the R word. What's funny about the Newsweek article, too, is that it opens with President Donald Trump called Walz what is typically a derogatory term for an individual who is suffering from intellectual disabilities. The Newsweek article actually makes it sound like they're questioning whether or not Governor Tim Walz does have intellectual disabilities, and quite honestly, I think that is debatable. The most important aspect of all of this isn't this ridiculous back and forth between the governor of Minnesota and President Donald Trump. No, it's the fact that Minnesota is now absolutely in the spotlight relating to immigration reform, and illegal immigration, especially in light of the 2 members of our National Guard that were shot by an individual who came in during the influx of those from Afghanistan in the botched pullout under former President Joe Biden. Yeah, Walz should be worried. The spotlight's on Minnesota for immigration, it's on it for fraud, and honestly, it's on it for Governor Tim Walz, too, if we get into his ties to China. But we'll wait to see how all of that plays out. Needless to say, it's all incredibly entertaining, and I'll be talking about it when my show returns from the Thanksgiving break on Monday morning, starting at 6 a.m. Central Time. You can listen live on the iHeartRadio app.
So Donald Trump is going to be getting aggressively involved with the 2026 midterms as if he's actually running in the races himself. Now, this is critical information because he knows he is breaking so many laws that if Republicans ever lose power at midterms, and more importantly, after 2026, he's going to be spending the rest of his life draining his funds on lawyers to defend him, right? Okay, so now the economy is tanking. Over 1 million people have lost their jobs directly as a result of Donald Trump's policies and tariffs. And you have a lot of Trump supporters that are turning. When I say a lot, enough to make a difference at midterms, enough where they may not bother to show up to vote at all at midterms, or they might actually show up to vote for Democrats. Enough that a lot of people are going to get registered to vote as Democrats because now they've been indifferent and apathetic about voting, and now their lives are being affected by his policies. The concern we have to pay attention to is that being in this Trump cult is an addiction, okay? So when he and all the Republicans running at midterms come out with all the woke platforms, knocking down DEI, all that kind of bullshit that has nothing to do with the economy, it's going to reactivate people's allegiances, even though it's an addiction to an occult. It'll wake up the brain circuitry and they'll go back voting for Republicans because Donald Trump said so, even though they woke up for a moment and figured out he's just a piece of shit who's been lying to everybody. We have to keep this in mind, that this is what's going to happen. Now, I'm going to tell you personally, when it comes to the 2026 presidential election, I literally am not going to support anybody who doesn't come out with aggressive platforms to investigate and charge everybody who's committed treason and who has broken all sorts of financial laws with insider trading and so forth. I don't want to hear from them. If you're going to take the high road and exclusively keep it on the subject of the economy, I'm just not going to support that candidate. I want to hear a candidate be as aggressive as the Republican candidates are going to be with reactivating the whole woke platform, anti-woke platform. I want to hear that they're going to develop departments to investigate every single ICE officer who violated somebody's rights, beat them up, and not only charge them criminally, go after all of them and charge them criminally, but claw back the $50,000 sign-on bonuses that they received. I want to hear that Pete Hegseth and others behind his decisions in the military are going to be charged with treason for violating international laws and our own laws to go through Congress to approve the kind of military actions he's been taking. I want to hear that every single politician, both Democrats and Republicans, who became millionaires in 2025 because Donald Trump and his messaging on tariffs was done to completely make the stock market do this so that they can buy down here with insider trading and sell up here, that they're all going to be charged criminally. Ask Martha Stewart, who barely did any of that they all should be charged. Like, I don't want to hear some peacemaker, let's turn the page. And, if we don't set a precedent and charge people criminally, devote resources to do that so that this never happens again, then what is the fucking point? Those are my thoughts.
Something amazing is happening all over the internet as the left-wing media ecosystem is getting built. And somebody wandered into my algorithm and I was immediately obsessed. And this is Nathan June, and he is specializing in economics, public policy and media literacy. And his messaging on Instagram and Twitter are something where it's just like, yes, his messaging has fangs. His messaging is direct. So welcome to iHip News, Nathan June. How are you today?
I am doing great. First off, it's actually Threads because I jumped the ship on X.
Yes.
When the fascists took over. But I am beyond thrilled to be here right now.
Okay, so you had a viral video where you explained the AI bubble burst. Can you please explain that to our listeners? So we have basically the economy for like 7 companies, and then we have the economy for the rest of the United States of America. And it just so happens the CEOs of these 7 companies are all Trump sycophants, ass kissers, humiliate themselves in the Oval Office by doing these embarrassing trophy presentations. Tell us what is happening, because we had a real estate burst with the mortgages. We had a .com burst, and everybody thinks we're on the verge of another massive burst.
Yeah. So what is basically happening right now is these companies are investing, $500 billion into AI. So, they're putting all this money into it. And it's not the AI that people are thinking. I think a lot of people, when they hear AI, they think like generative AI or like, Trump, as Rambo, you know what I mean? Like sitting on a horse. I don't know if you've seen this in the past 24 hours. He is going on an AI posting spree on Truth Social just in the past 24 hours. He's posting screen grabs of X posts. I don't understand how this is the president of the United States. Every single day I tell myself this is just the new normal, but every day I'm just like, what in the actual fuck is happening? But like, with AI, you have all these companies that are pouring money into it. Okay. Right now, the actual revenue that they're generating is a fraction of what they are investing into it. And they're building these city-sized data centers, and they're building basically all of these systems to try and force people to adapt to AI because they believe, transparently speaking, they believe it's their best way to compete with China right now. And so what's happening, and why a lot of not just like people like me, but you have investors, you have analysts, you have economists who are basically saying this needs to produce a lot of revenue very, very quickly. Otherwise, these companies are going to start pulling back their investment and they're going to start withdrawing their commitments. And when that happens, again, the stock market, the S&P, is basically kept afloat by the Magnificent Seven. And so people are basically fearing a crash because you see MAGA morons and you see Trump every day celebrating how strong our economy is. And they always point back to the stock market. And mind you, 90% of the stock market is owned by the top 10% of Americans or just investors in general. So you're talking about the stock market being strong, rich people getting richer, and it's basically supported by these 7 companies who are investing $500 billion into AI. So if this bursts, it's going to basically be somebody out of these 7 are going to withdraw their commitment to AI, or they're going to stop investing in it. And it's going to create a domino effect. And we're going to potentially see a giant crash, which ultimately impacts people's retirement. It impacts like our tax dollars being able to go towards federal funding, just because